Welcome to Eternal Elements Learning Podcast, brought to you by Atyasa Online. These podcasts are a part of the audio certificate programs on Atyasa Online. You're free to take these podcasts on your desired portal also, should you only wish to learn on the go. Thank you so much for engaging on these podcasts, and you can connect with the author on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook. Hi, this is Niket Karajagi from Atyasa Online. On Eternal Elements podcast, we talk about leadership behaviors, and this is season 3. I'm going to talk about communicating for influence. Communicating for influence is very crucial because prolific communication is extremely critical to leadership. Communication is a link between your team, your customer, your organization, and all the possible stakeholders that you may be dealing with. A lot of times, barriers come in because people don't communicate properly. So what is effective communication? Let's understand, there is a sender. I'm a sender to you. You're the receivers. I'm using a medium called the podcast, but I don't have a feedback from you. And because I don't have a feedback from you directly, what do? I look for a feedback on the analytic dashboard. And because I see the feedback on the analytic dashboard, I realize people are consuming this podcast. Therefore, the loop becomes complete. The same thing holds true in any communication in our real life. There is a sender. The sender thinks in his or her mother tongue, translates that into a language which is understandable by the sender and the receiver. Or maybe you would use a translator. You use the correct medium, which could be an email, it could be voice, it could be video, it could be anything. Now, once the medium is chosen, or it could be a web-based medium, once the medium is chosen, then the sender receives the information, and then the sender decodes the information by translating it into his or her own mother tongue. It's called the mother tongue influence, and this could create a lot of distortion. And based on the way the message is decoded, you get a feedback. So obviously there's a noise that comes in, and one of the noise is noise of perception. Maybe you don't get along, maybe there's no trust, maybe there are cultural barriers. So the whole lot of barriers to this. So how do we make our communication effectively? First, understand whether the person is a high context or a low context person. Most of the cultures are either high context or some cultures are low context. High context is the conversation is more metaphorical, indirect. Low context is direct. So check, how would the person be? How would he receive the information? And then use a language which is simple. Do not overcomplicate it. Because if you complicate the language, then people may get impressed with your flowery language, but they don't understand what you actually said. And that's not the way it works in business. Maybe if you are in a conference of literature, it makes sense to use a language which is quite sophisticated and so on way. But business language is simple because ultimately communication is currency. So be a sender who understands how the recipient is going to get your information. Be factually correct and talk simple, be straightforward, and be receptive to the feedback and see if the person is understanding. You may also want to check if the person is understanding and be very sensitive to any noise that gets generated. But let's ensure one thing: start with a small talk, build the trust, and after the trust is built, only then you get into complex conversations. That's about communication. The problem is a lot of people tend to jump into direct confrontational communication, and that doesn't work. Build your chemistry first. We're dealing with people, and that's how it goes. So, this is Niket Karajagi from Atyasa Online for Eternal Elements, talking to you about communicating prolifically, communicating for influence, because communication is business currency. Communication is a link between your customer and the stakeholders. I shall see you in the next podcast. And we will talk about how this communication links up with your teams.